So yeah, we've got a game dev question in the chat. That's quite a good question. So someone said, could you give some advice on how to fight against the urge to increase the scope of the game outside of the initial plan? It's too easy to do so and very tempting, especially when brainstorming. I mean, if you're brainstorming, then you're still making the initial plan, aren't you? But one of the things I would do, and I've seen this done in lots of places where I've worked, is you would have a spreadsheet kind of like this, and you would have, I guess, features more than tasks. So describe your features that you want to do, right? So player can click on items to trigger them. And then let's have a feature. When player clicks items, they have unique sound effects, right? So these are linked features, but they are slightly different. They achieve different things. And then you would have like why are you doing that? Like reason or rationale over here. And if you were working in like a really corporate game development environment, I don't know, like free-to-play studios are like this, right? You would have your reason or rationale would be one of your KPIs, one of your key performance indicators. So it'd be something like monetization or engagement or retention, right? These are the three ones that you use in really corporate game dev. So engagement is getting people to enjoy the game in the first place. Retention is getting people to stay in the game. And monetization is getting them to spend money after they're in the game. And you wouldn't have that in an indie game because you're working on the assumption that you're making a premium game, and that people are going to have bought your game before they play it. So these would be the project pillars, right, of like which thing are we trying to do. In an indie context, you're dealing with player stuff that is a bit less commercial and a bit more kind of feels based. So what you would do is you would have your list of features that you want to do in your backlog, and then you would have like categories that you put them in of like what do they do. And this one would be like core gameplay. When player clicks items, they have unique sound effects. That is still important, but it's a different category of stuff. It's like feedback and juice or whatever you want to call it. And then what I would do is like color code these things. And that means that as you come up with all the things you want to do in your project, you can put them in categories like this. The problem that this is coming from in terms of like the person in the chat who's made this request, you had an initial plan, a few artists wanted to join, now they're pressing to add more things to the already agreed upon idea, right? So what I would do is create something like this that you can use as a tool, add all of the ideas in, whether you like them or not, and categorize them. And from there, rather than sort of like pushing back on things in the moment and saying, right, we're not doing that, you can store it for later. And then if you do have some kind of disciplined way of working in sprints, and if you're in an indie team, I would do it based on month. Like in this month, here's what we're hoping to achieve by the end of the month. Maybe you work for 3 weeks and then you review, and the last week is just about like playtesting the game and coming up with ideas and discussing what you've done so far. Whatever the cadence is, what you do is for each block of time, you then go back to this list and you go through it and you say, right, what's the priority for the next build? We're focusing on that. And then you would pick items off of here, something here to indicate which of these you're doing at the moment. If you have a full log of everything that's been suggested, then what you can do, instead of having to push back on individual people coming up with ideas and say, we're not doing that. Because the other thing is, some of those ideas might be really good. Some of those ideas might be like the secret sauce that make the game that you're working on like really special. And having them recorded is important because you might not be able to see why they're good ideas right at this moment. And I would say if you're on a project where you are like the lead developer and you're doing everything, you're having to code everything yourself, and you've got artists working with you and your artists are starting to come up with game design ideas, that is probably a blessing in disguise. Because I have worked on so many projects where the artists just see themselves as work for hire and they don't take a great amount of interest in the gameplay side of things. They don't take a great amount of interest in trying to sort of ideate and come up with ideas for like interactive elements in the game and stuff like that. So it might be frustrating having to deal with that that issue of too many cooks spoil the broth. Everyone's trying to come up with ideas, everyone's trying to add stuff to the project. But I think that is probably a good sign that you're working with good people, because they care enough about the project to see it as a whole thing. You know, they want to add things to the game, they want the whole game to be bigger and better. And I've worked with lots of visual artists who do not think that way about games. They just see it as a task, and they make some art assets and they make what they're told. And I think a lot of people think that's the kind of artist they want to work with, but it becomes very frustrating and very stagnant very quickly working with people like that, because you occasionally want someone to feedback on something, and if all they care about is how the thing they made looks and not the whole thing, that's very frustrating. So yeah, I would say have a way like this of basically taking in every idea, and then you're killing two birds with one stone then, because you're saying to people, look, your idea has been heard, I've recorded and stored your idea, and also for yourself, you're making sure you don't lose any of those ideas of what people want to do, because you've got them recorded. And then you can look at them maybe a month later and go, oh, actually, that is a really good idea, and we do have time to do it now. And I would have pushed back on it when they first suggested doing that, because I'm worried about how much time we have, or like what there is to do. But if you go down this route of just storing all the ideas that people have, categorizing them, and then like giving them a status. Yeah, in Google Sheets you can make them into, in progress would be blue, done would be, I don't know, on hold would be something, and you can, you know, categorize things this way. And then every block of time you commit to, whether you're doing sprints of 2 weeks or a month or however long those time periods are, where you say, right, this is what we're doing now. During that time period, you set all the stuff you're doing to in progress. And if you've got some other way of managing a team, like a Trello board or something, that's when you fill up the board with this list of stuff. But if you've got this kind of backlog, then everyone knows that the ideas they come up with are being heard, are being listened to and kind of weighed up. And if you put things into categories like this of like, what does it serve? Like, it might be that these are your game pillars from your game design document of like your 3 things you're trying to achieve. Like, maybe it's not categories like core gameplay and feedback and juice. Maybe, you know, one of the things I often tell people to do is base your game design pillars on the 14 forms of fun. I think actually picking 3 things off of this list to be the focus of your game. So I could say, when players click items, they have unique sound effects, is actually an immersion thing. And if you put things in categories like this, then when you come to this stage of working out what to do, what's on hold, then you can like say, oh, well, we're gonna focus on immersion this month. So we're just gonna do, everyone is gonna be adding sound effects or adding VFX or doing stuff that makes the world feel more real. And you can have a month where you just focus on one of these areas of your game, right? Or if you want the whole game moving along, it can be structured a different way, where, you know, you come to work out what to do next, and you look at these categories and you pick a few things from each category, and you say, well, we're going to do a few new core gameplay things, and we're going to go back and add these kind of immersive sound effects and VFX to other things. The illustrious Crane in the chat said this is better than like flat out discouraging people from by saying stuff is out of scope, right? Because it is a really difficult balance, because you don't want to overscope, and when you have a group project with lots of people working on it, people like excitedly going, and we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this, is dangerous, right? Because if you say yeah, right, like there's the brainstorming rule of yes and, which is what you use in what's it called, improv acting, where someone says something and you say yes and, so you agree to what already was said, and then you move on from there. And that's kind of one of the things you're supposed to do in brainstorming, because if you block every idea, then people kind of lock up and they stop coming up with ideas, right? But I think having some sort of system for saying, right, all of the ideas go here, and then on this day and this day and this day, we're going to look at all the ideas, work out what our overall goal is, and pick which of those ideas to kind of get moving on and action in some way. If you have this list and there's someone whose ideas never get picked, then over time they're probably going to get annoyed with that. But you're at least giving them the opportunity to kind of have their ideas seriously considered, rather than just kind of flat out saying no to everything as soon as it's suggested. I'm glad that that's kind of a useful approach maybe. Let's see how you get on with it. Let me know how you get on with approaching things that way.